So, welcome to The Crafted and Creative, a podcast meant to uplift and engage BIPOC creatives who are on their journey of making a social impact and creating a lasting legacy, as well as create community and a sense of guidance for those that are looking to do the same. Today's guest is Cortney Danielle Moore. She is a multimedia journalist whose work spans business, lifestyle, and entertainment. She currently reports on South Florida's hospitality and travel industries, covering restaurants, hotels, aviation, and cruise lines, while also drawing on her background reporting lifestyle and general news for national audiences. Recognized for her investigative depth, her versatile storytelling, and visual arts. She has earned a Communicator Award of Distinction for her video news package on Miami Heat star Jimmy Butler's Big Face coffee brand and two first place honors from the Society of Professional Journalists, Florida Pro Chapter, Sunshine State Awards, and Business and Consumer Affairs and Lifestyle Trends. I know that's right, girl. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on my podcast on this beautiful Saturday day. I don't know. Oh, you're in Florida, right? Or are you
Yes,
East Coast?
yes, I'm in Miami, but thank you for reading that all off because it's all still new to me. So makes me feel like I'm more important and more accomplished than I am. But thank you. Sometimes I forget all the things that I've done.
No, this is great. Like you've done some really great work here. But just to start off, we'll, go into your background. What made you get into journalism? You also have like a fashion background.
Yeah, so that's a funny story because they kind of directly tie in. So this high school that I went to, it's actually like also a trade school, so they also teach like fashion design and art. So actually I had gotten in for the art program because I was just very good at drawing and things like that. I even won awards for that in middle school. So when I transferred, I got in for that. But then I was like, you know what, I'm kind of good at this. So then I switched to fashion design, which is its whole other ballpark. I'm not gonna lie, my grades might have suffered a little bit because that might have been a little bit more challenging than for me. Just because you have some teachers and there wasn't really like a rubric. So sometimes people would just give out like grades willy-nilly. And I'm a type A person where like I've always been like an A student. So it's like somebody gives me like a lower grade than I wanted for like stitching and stuff like that. I'm like, what is this based on? Like, especially if you can't really tell me. You're like, oh, I just wanted to give you a 75 just cause. So pretty much I learned the skills for that and like I loved like making costumes and like outfits for myself. But then, you have to be realistic, especially like based off of that experience and grades. I was like, you know what? I don't think I want to continue this into college because a lot of the students they end up going to like FIT, which is like right down the block from the high school that I went to. So, you just have to sit down and think long and hard about what you want to do when you get into college, especially like, I guess the second you turn 18, it's kind of crazy that we make people do that.
Mm-hmm.
But pretty much I guess I was a homebody too. So I was always watching TV. And then one day it just clicked because I was at the time, Juliana Rancic was on the yeah, E News pretty much. That was like back in its heyday. So she was on there. And I guess they had like Fashion Police, the regular, like, all the like fashion beauty oriented things. And then this also, it was Jeannie Mai, if but this was before the reel came out. So E had like a fashion channel called the Style Network back in the day.
Yes.
And so she used to host a show called How Do I Look, which was very similar to like that TLC show where they would give people makeovers. Was it? I can't remember the name of that one, but you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
So she would kind of like, like redo people's like wardrobes and things like that. And it seemed like it was a very helpful thing for people. And since I was just a fan of these shows, I was like, wait, how does somebody get on TV and like do things like that? So I looked it up and so on. And not for Jeannie Mai, like she didn't go to like journalism college, but Juliana Rancic definitely did. And her road to like how she got there is kind of fascinating because when you look her up, she like was on like in Washington, D.C. reporting on politics and then made
Mm,
the switch. So
really?
for me, I was just like, okay, if that's kind of the path she did, like I'm gonna start like studying journalism basically, which is great because I think the stuff I was picking before that was like linguistics because I was like, you know what, I want to learn different languages. I wish I could have done it all, but yeah, that's kind of how I got into journalism specifically.
You know what's funny? I used to love e-news.
Yeah.
I think that made me also want to kind of go to, the arts, and like I loved seeing like the red carpet looks, when they
Yeah.
would interview people before like the big award shows. And I'm like, I want to do that. And
Yeah.
by the time my senior year of high school, my prom dress was inspired by a dress that Keira Knightley wore to the SAG Awards. And I remember watching them highlight her dress on E. And I'm like, oh, yeah, this is it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
but, I love it because, sometimes I go to these journalism like networking events, and some people, I guess they say that they went into journalism for the right reasons, like reporting truths, exposing, holding powers to account. And I feel like mine's is a very superficial how I got in there, but you navigate and you figure out which beat you can do. Like you don't have to just do like entertainment and lifestyle. But I love it when I meet people like that. I feel like also women generally we go into like lifestyle, entertainment, and then on the boys' side, it's like, oh, I want to do sports.
I want to do sports. I want to do all this hard stuff. And I think that's great. I think originally I was a journalism major,
Hmm.
and I wish I had really went into lifestyle and entertainment. And I think that's kind of why I have a podcast now, because now I
Hmm.
can kind of do my own thing. But at the time, like those intro classes, I found it to be very political.
Hmm.
We had to do like the standard reporting on what was happening, with the wars at the time, and like all this stuff that I was just like, I don't know if I want to do this. But
Hmm.
yeah, eventually we transitioned into the right niche, you find what
Hmm.
you want to do. Um, so you mentioned two influential people. Were there other influences in the journalism world that caused you to really want to explore being?
I wish I could say like there was somebody. I mean, even to this day, I feel like I don't like look at old school broadcasters the way some other journalists do. I am like, I guess I am just like a celebrity news junkie and like into fashion, beauty, and all those things like that. So even like as I thought of it more before I joined you here, like I guess like, like even as you mentioned, like we both looked at it, we're like, oh yeah, we're gonna be on the red carpet and do that. And like, yeah, it could come and go. But I think at the time too, like Kiki Palmer at the time when I was in high school, she had like been like announced as like the youngest talk show host person like in history or something like that. So I think I was a little delulu going, oh yeah, okay, she beat me to it, but like that means I can just do that too. And like somebody's gonna give me a show, like I'm gonna be the next Oprah or something like that. And so I think it was like between her and then like even that a couple years before that, like remember when Tyra Banks had her talk show?
Yes.
Yes. So between her, I guess Wendy Williams, but I was more of a Tyra girl because America's Next Top Model was in there too. So it was like you were double dipping watching her.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh, you just named all of my examples. I
Yeah.
think literally Oprah, because The Color Purple has such a huge influence on me as an actor. And so
Hmm.
seeing her show and being like, whoa, she has this huge like journalistic background and she can go and do movies too. I want to do that. And like you
Hmm.
said with Keke Palmer, I think that girl, yeah, she introduced so much to me as an artist. So much
Yeah.
respect to her. Um, and so going back into your fashion and visual arts, how does that really deepen and implore your work as a journalist?
I think for sure if like a fashion topic comes up, it like I have a different viewpoint. So that's why it's also good to have like diversity in your news staff because, just the storytelling will end up differently. So I remember one time when I was at Fox Business, this was like shortly before, this was like right when the pandemic was starting. And this was like when people weren't really paying attention. So like people like noticed when the world shut down in like March 2020, but the pandemic really started like before that. Like I'd say we started reporting like November, December 2019, at least on the business side, because it was affecting markets like the supply chain and logistics from all the stuff that we were getting shipped in from China. So we were reporting on it. I don't know how many people were actually reading it, but I had to keep an eye out on like trends and so on to keep on adding to the story. And at least for me at the time, I was engaged preparing for my own wedding. So there were like reports coming out like, hey, like people who are getting married, like they might not be able to get their wedding dresses in time because the fabrics aren't able to be produced in China because of these shipping delays. And, there's so many people sick, they can't produce the dresses. And all that stuff that you can imagine. I remember like, such a big deal to me. I'm like, I don't know how many people are getting married in a year, but I'm like, it just does affect like thousands, if not millions of people who were planning to get married in 2020. So of course had to pitch that to some editors. They didn't believe it when I first did it, but then somebody else on staff, their sister was like, "Oh, we're having a hard time getting a wedding dress." And I guess they just needed that one more confirmation and be like, "Okay, fine, go do the story." And that's like, I'm very proud of that because I turned that out really quick once they like gave it the approval. But you do out your stuff, you reach out to your sources, and I was able to like paint that picture. And you always have to think about like the wider audience because again, not a bridal magazine exactly, but you
Hmm.
got to try to find a way to make everybody else care. So maybe like you're not getting married, but like you might have like a granddaughter or grandson or who knows, like whatever distant family member or friend, colleague, whatever, just to try to like interest people. So
Hmm.
that's always been my way to like get into it. Just like, hey, this might be niche because again, also let's not deny sometimes the decision makers can skew male or whatever, and they might not care or about like these girlier topics, but you guys just got to find a way to like convince them. You got to get that buy-in
Mm,
story. So you just have to think about it differently.
I love that. Now, I love this on your website. You say asking a journalist to pick a favorite story is like asking them to choose a favorite memory. I love that so much. So instead of asking what is your favorite story, what is the story that has brought you the most joy so far?
Ooh, that's joy. Again, it's so tough because throughout my it feels like it's a short career, but I'm like I have like 8 years in. So it's like that in between, that mid-year. So there's like thousands to pick from. But I think one that like actually brings me joy, I mean, it might also make me a little sad, but there was this it was assigned to me. One of my editors, they're obsessed, like especially on like national news websites about people who reached age 100. And so for this one was like it was assigned to me. It was like, "Hey, this couple, they both like reached their 100th birthday." And like they had like a little celebration. So like try to reach out to see if you could get in touch with them. I did, and I was able to do this interview. Unfortunately, it was only, or maybe it's fortunately, the husband was able to like do the interview on behalf because his wife, I think she had like she's late stage dementia. She wasn't able to like verbalize their story, but it was like, when you watch The Notebook, when somebody's like telling you recapturing or like revisiting the memories that led to their love story. So like it was like a very long conversation on the phone with him, maybe like over an hour. And like it was just so beautiful. Like I think he was like a soldier in World War II. They were sending letters back and forth. He even like was able to provide me pictures from that time because they'd send like pictures of themselves and like letters. And there was like one time, I guess, I don't know if it was risque, but she sent one of herself in like a hula skirt. I don't know if she was at a party or something like that, but that was really funny. And so like having all those photos and like hearing the way that he said it, I wish I could have like just published like a transcript of the full conversation, but like it really touched me. And like, I think I did a good job. I can see if I can find the link and send it to you. But like that one, like, it wasn't like something big. It wasn't celebrity driven. It wasn't political, like, something like that. It was just something like, hey, these are real people who existed. And like, this is just a beautiful story. And then like couple months afterwards, I found out that they both passed away, which is really, really sad. But like, I feel like I did something to like, contribute because I think we all think about that. I think
Memorialize
it's,
them.
yeah, like I don't want to be super morbid, but sometimes it's just like you want to have see evidence that like you left something behind, a legacy or a mark. So they might not be like famous people, but at least if people find this story online, they're like, oh, that's cool. I don't know them, but this touched my heart.
Hmm. Wow, that's so beautiful. Wow. Okay. So going back to your current work as reporting on tourism and hospitality in South Florida, is there an essence of Florida life that you want to capture in your work when you're reporting on that?
I try. It's a little interesting, especially when you're at a business publication that might have like, I don't want to say lines, but we're very like objective, factual to the point. Some people like to do it like they have more narratives added into their story. I get to do that more when we do like these extended like cover stories for the print editions. But in the dailies, they're usually shorter to the point stories. But I will say, like, for me, maybe it's fortunate that being in South Florida, specifically in Miami too, even though we cover all three counties, is that like it's just a different market. So originally I'm from New York. Even though we have a lot of New York transplants here, it's just very different. There's similarities, but it's different. So it's like, hey, in New York, you could walk around and like you could have the richest person in the world walk by you and you have no idea because they're not like flaunting it with like designer clothes all the time, even though we do have some people who are into designer. But even when I lived there, I wasn't aware. And then like
Mm,
I moved down here and now I'm like, I feel like I know more of the designers because it's just so in your face, like all the Chanel bags, the YSLs. And then like again, like I said, the rich people in New York, you don't really know where they go. Like maybe they run off to the Hamptons or something like that. But here is like they might be rich or they might not. It depends. But like you'll see it because there's like a mega yacht going right by you, and you're like, who are these people
yeah.
like turning up on a boat on a Tuesday afternoon? Like, why
Hmm.
aren't you working? So it's just a very different vibe. I would say like both cities have like a hustle culture, but it's just different. New York,
Different.
it's like very corporate. Here, you could just there's more entrepreneurship, maybe because not all the industries are built up. So there's a lot of people who are just like, yeah, I'm celebrating on this boat because I have this like obscure, like weird business. It could be like, I don't know, like a car wash or like even some we have a lot of this. I feel like we're becoming the Los Angeles of the Southeast where it's just like, yeah, I'm this crazy content creator. People love my food videos or whatever. So it doesn't always make it into my stories because sometimes it's hard to connect with these people and being a small paper, sometimes they give you time, sometimes they don't. But
Mm,
it's like I always try to provide that context like, hey, this is what's going on, it's bucking the trend nationally, but like here's the why and explaining that for people. Sometimes people know because they read here, but then sometimes we have readers from other cities. So sometimes you got to battle. Like I explain this and then I don't have to explain this because you don't want to like keep on pointing out the obvious to
yes.
people.
Got you. Got you. Got you. So on that like structure of a story, how do
Mhm.
you feel like is the hook, like how do you feel like is the way that you can hook a reader when you're working on a story?
Ooh, that is so tough. I feel like most journalists, especially now, they are struggling to figure that out because there's so much to it. So it's like more than writing anymore. I think like if you started your career maybe a decade or two ago, it's like, yes, it's solely just writing talent. But now we have like SEO, which is short for search engine optimization. So it's like stuffing headlines and like subheads of like keywords of the top most Googled search terms, right? So sometimes you got to like write to that, which is a little formulaic, and maybe some people don't like that. That's like changed the way we navigate modern journalism, but it
Hmm.
matters. And then even with that, like now they're trying to say, oh, there's this new thing called GEO, which is like factoring into the AI. So it's like generated, it's the same thing as SEO, but it's like the generative AI. So it's like, hey, those like Google AI, like the little summaries that they have at top. It's like, hey, let's play the game to try to like use the keywords to make sure we appear top of Google this way so we can
Mm,
hopefully get more clicks. So I think you have to try to be witty and catchy. So it depends on your publication. For
mhm.
me, when I was at Fox News and Fox Business, and even when I was at the wedding publication, I was at Black Bride magazine, I would try to do like what I call ethical clickbait, which is just like pull out like the most interesting SEO keyword thing that I can stuff into a headline, but then I'd like end it with like a colon and then like a quote, like the shortest quote. So it's like usually like
Mm,
3 words, something that somebody said that I'd be like, I don't want to say it could be scandalous, but something that's interesting to incentivize somebody to read more. Because sometimes you can have a generic headline, but it's like, whatever. But if somebody says something interesting, you're like, huh, why'd they say that?
mhm.
And that's kind of been my approach. Now, it always, even though that's my approach, sometimes I don't win in the end. Sometimes it's the editors to get the final say. So it's a fine balance.
Wow. It's so strange how everything is really digital now and how, digital and AI and all of these like technical things is impacting industries across the board.
Yeah.
Now, do you feel like, because we do have a lot more sources with Instagram and TikTok, and people are pulling their news from these sources, do you feel like that's shifting journalism in a positive way or a negative way? Now there's so much room for misinformation because it's so much information out there.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I like it, and maybe it could be generational. I do know, of course, there's misinformation that happens, but I'm not gonna lie, sometimes that happens in journalism too. Like my husband, he jokes with me sometimes throughout my whole career. He just goes like, "Oh yeah, there's only a few people like you doing the actual homework, but." Tons of other news outlets, they just look at that kid who did the homework and they just kind of copy and do it their own way.
Mhm.
So there's like issues in the industry too. So I don't try to like, even though I still work in legacy media, I don't like look down on anybody who's a content creator that's doing news too. That's kind of a fight that's happening right now. It's like, what is a journalist? Who is a journalist? What is news? And, we're not like, even though we operate with like a code of ethics, like freedom of speech, the First Amendment, like that's why we have that. We don't have licenses to be like, you're a journalist. So even though some of us do spend a lot of money to go to journalism school,
Mhm.
but that's why it's always like, sometimes you don't have to. And that kind of like grinds people's gears. But I always think maybe sharing more and educating people. So I think like teaching content creators how to operate ethically and fact check better helps. And then at the same time, journalists, I will admit sometimes, especially us on the print or digital side who've been behind the cameras and aren't confident to go in front, there's something we can learn from them too. So it's like, hey, don't hate the player, like join in on the game and learn how to do
Mhm.
it too. If you're mad that there's a content creator who's like using a little green screen with your article in the background and they're breaking down what you wrote, maybe you should start doing that too so you can like have a more control on the information that's coming out because sometimes when they're doing those summaries they might like misquote or say something because again you read it, you interpret it, you might say it a specific way. So that's one way I think journalists can take ownership and try to combat that if they feel like that's an issue, but that's always like the tough part. Not everybody wants to be on camera and do it that way. Some people just want to stick to writing, sending out newsletters or something else, but I think everybody just needs to be careful at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Now, staying kind of on that tail end, with the information, and we love, clickbait, we love hot topics, we love things that are gonna get the girls talking. For for you, how do you deal with like, or have you ever been in a situation where you're dealing with ethical reporting? Or say you're working on a story and something is not quite right because it is a collaborative effort, right? You have your editors, you're pitching stories. Have you been in a situation where you had to say, no, I think that we should approach it from this angle, or I think we really need to capture these truths about this story?
I will say, throughout my career, I'm probably a little bit of an outlier where I've been a little bit more solitary than having it be a full team sport like how it's usually been. And that's probably just because there's so much to cover and do that people can't like fully like they can't micromanage so much. So I've had a lot of wiggle room and leeway to just like kind of produce the stories that I want to in the way I want. And they usually don't get messed up too much. I'm not going to say like sometimes things with like headlines, they can, in my opinion, get bungled a bit, but usually they're not so drastically different from what the core story is. It's more like, hey, I just probably wouldn't have used those words because I like the keywords that I think people are going to Google more and so on. But yeah, I guess stuff like that does happen, but I've been again pretty fortunate to be like, hey, you're not twisting the story. Like I said, I like ethical clickbait, so I kind of find something that's I think that pushes it as far as it can go, without like compromising integrity or things like that. And I think a lot of my editors, they've appreciated that and it gives them less work to have to do. It wasn't always that way. Pretty much just using like all the tools that you can to like analyze audience feedback and engagement kind of like dictated and made me better over time. Because I know in the beginning when I first started, there'd be some editors that they're like, oh, I really had to do some surgery in there.
It's a
But
changing landscape. Like you said, I
yeah,
think,
yeah,
maybe that was more so of the story for journalists, 15, 20 years ago, where, they had to kind of be a little scandalous in their reporting or how they go
yeah,
about things. But now you can work more
exactly.
independently and have sources to double check your work and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now, for your Jimmy Butler interview for his coffee brand, Big Face, how was that?
That was a fun one. That one was, I guess because I had done an article on it coming to the area at some point earlier in the year. Maybe they like shortlisted me on a list or something like that, where they're like, "Hey, here are local journalists," because they invited me, and it's so funny because like I pretty much told my editors about it last minute because I was just like it was like, they're saying that you can meet them, but sometimes you go out to these events and like you don't actually get any individual time with like the celebrity or whatnot. So it's always like, are they being serious? Or they just trying to fill in seats and so on? But eventually, like, I was like, let me just try because, at least where I've been, the newspaper that I started at down here, like they weren't really doing any video work or anything like that. And honestly, again, somebody who's like really artsy and visual, I was like, you know what? I want to like start doing that again. Like that's just honestly, I probably prefer putting together video packages more than I do actual writing, like short and long form articles. That's my little secret. But yeah, so it was just a lot of back and forth with the manager pretty much where it was just like, hey, like you're saying we're gonna have time. So I had to poke and prod to get more like direct answers, to get the okay from my editors because they were just like, eh. And sometimes you hear celebrities that they'll either not show up at all or show up late and all these things. But he was very professional and he showed up like he got there early enough. Traffic was bad, so he wasn't. I won't say he showed up late, but it's like this was during Art Basel, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but it's like a real big art festival from Switzerland that they do this whole big thing in like Miami Beach, and traffic is a nightmare basically. So that one is perfectly fine. But I got there and like that gave me enough time to try to like film B-roll outside the shop and try to do some stand-ups myself. Didn't end up using that footage because the audio was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
But just the whole thing, it was nice. I will say, like, I haven't done a celebrity interview in a long time, so I won't lie. It was a little nerve-wracking, but I timed it out with the help of ChatGPT somewhat because, I got them to agree to give me like, I don't even know if it was 5 to 10 minutes, but whatever time frame they gave me, I like, hey, like here are some of the questions I'm coming up with, but like I need to make sure it's perfectly timed. Help me estimate and like rank the order of importance for the questions so I can make best use of my time. That's like how I like to use AI.
Mm-hmm.
And it all came together. It was nerve-wracking, like I said, because again, it was like junket style in his coffee shop, and you're producing a podcast. So you can imagine the acoustics are just not made for that. So pretty much after the interview, that went all well, but it's like the post-production that went into cleaning up the audio and everything like that. It was a lot. I learned a lot of skills. I had to get over my fear of Adobe Audition and try to take out that background noise because you would just, since it wasn't just me, you would hear all the other teams in the background like breaking down equipment, even though they try to do it as quietly as they can. But you could just hear those pops and all those other crazy sounds. But I don't know, it took me a while to clean that up. But in the end, like I submitted it, people were like, we don't even know what issues you're talking about. And then it's, entered it into an award that I just saw on Instagram just for like just to see what would happen.
Yeah,
And yeah, actually, I guess it won. It
you
won
did.
something. So
Wow.
that's really cool. And I'm not the biggest sports person, but I'm told that they're like, oh, I like the way it came out. It really made him seem like a human being.
Wow. I mean, and you said you pitched this to your publication, right? You pitched it. It wasn't something that was originally, you brought it to them.
Yeah, I did bring it to them, and it's just, I guess, having a little audacity, which will help you in this industry. So even though it's like I'm not certain it's gonna work, but like I'm gonna do my best to turn something in. And like I said, it was a lot of back and forth because they're like, ah, is he serious? And then even one editor, I won't say he was trying to sabotage, but
Oh.
he was just like, hey, you think you could get him to like come and sit down with us and like do a one-on-one interview? We can make it really special. And I was like, you think an A-list celebrity is going to come like not just do it in like this junket style thing where they're talking to as many people as possible? You think he's just gonna come back, revisit on another day and time and be like, yes, I'm just gonna talk to you. Like,
Hmm.
I don't think that's likely, and this might be our only shot. So let's not try to play with people's ego. I don't know if we have that sway, and this is just me being realistic about the status of publications. Not that I'm saying anything bad about mine, but based off the conversations I've had with PR people, there is a priority order of like what publication you will talk to. And like your A list would be like the super big national places. And it just is what it is. And all we can do to try to combat that is do good work when we do get these opportunities. It's not like, let's not jeopardize Jimmy Butler if we're going to be trying to chase down other big names after that. So let's have this. And we did. We have proof of concept. And now we're like trying to book bigger guests than that.
Mm. So staying flexible and staying open to changes, but also having a drive for what you want to produce is important to your work, essentially.
Exactly. And also just I think a lot of that too in this industry, like there's so much ego wrapped into it. So it's like, yes, my publication, they're big in their own right in terms of like real estate reporting and things like that, like just local business news. But it's like, hey, you might be big in this thing, but when you step into this other area, like nobody knows you. So you need to like reestablish yourself and prove that you can like do this. You can't just like bank on your name. Maybe some places you can with like the top of the tops, like I said. I came from Fox News, despite what people think about that and what they might say publicly, privately. But like, I would see the emails that would happen behind the scenes. People really like that publication and want to be on the show or on the website in any form. Like, people will bend over backwards to provide a comment to them, even though they might not like celebrate it publicly. But I'm reaching out to like the same groups of people.
Mm.
Like, I would cover like cruise lines and so on at the national publication, and I'm reaching out to the same people here. They take their time to reply to me when at my small newspaper that I'm at right now versus when I would reach out to them for a comment. And it'd be like silly things, not super scandalous, but like let's say some of these cruise lines, they have like those crazy water slides and people
Hmm.
get stuck in them all the time.
Hmm.
And it'd be like, hey, what are you going to do to like fix this, And like blah blah blah. I had the same response same day.
Oh, wow.
And here it's like I can ask them a question and it's like it would really benefit you. We're like a local publication in your backyard. I'm asking about your business. Just give me your best quote and it's going to make you shine. Sometimes they don't reply at all. And other times it's like, oh yeah, I'll reply to you like weeks from when you asked me this question.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So it really does become a part of the brand. I mean, do you have a preference between working at a larger publication or a smaller publication? Because it seems like you can pitch yourself, with the smaller publication.
I will say, since I did it kind of backwards, I'm kind of learning this now, and maybe I'm running my mouth too much and I shouldn't be saying this, but I'm more pragmatic and a realist. So it's like, hey, for me, starting at a national outlet so early after college, like it's hard in its own ways in that like you have such a big audience, like millions of people looking at any given time. So what's super important is accuracy, because if you're not, you have thousands of people who are flooding the comments under that article or your social media that want to tell you you're wrong, you're an idiot, whatever.
Mm.
But then when you're at a smaller publication, like you don't have as many eyes on you, but you have to do more to get those scoops, like comb through like government documents to find the story that people at the big organizations aren't doing. So I will say bigger, it's more stressful in that you have more people looking at stuff. But at the same time, since you're so big, people kind of just give you stories. Like, you don't have to go digging. They're like, I want to be on here, so I'm going to leak this information regardless. So it doesn't happen the same way for smaller ones. So I think it's good that I started. Maybe it's like made me, I don't want to say so much a pessimist, but it shows like, hey, this is really how like media is structured. And it's made me a better journalist to work my way back because even though I would cover like big stories like bankruptcies and so on at the national outlet, because people would like either send me or somebody like other like everybody nationally was just reporting on it at the same time. Now at the place I'm at now, I was like, hey, I know how to go into like court documents and find the bankruptcy filing myself and read it so I understand what it's saying. So I have all these like little nuggets that make
Mm,
my story more original and better and versus what I was doing before.
yeah, you
So
have a large scope now. Like you have all
exactly.
these tools that you know how to access. But you also mentioned people commenting on your stories when you were working at Fox. How do you work and deal with that feedback on your articles when someone is like saying,
Yeah.
"Oh, I don't like this" or "I don't like that"? How do you deal with that?
So at least when it's on like the website, it doesn't really matter because it's not like you're getting like like emails popping up like with your own social media feed. So like they just generate or they don't. Sometimes like people just aren't interested enough to comment, but if it is something like that's spicy or fun, like they just can't resist. And I think that's also why they leave the comments open because again, that's engagement. So like that's a metric that you would use for like success. It's like, hey, the longer you keep people on the page, the more ads run on the page that, we make more money. So
Mm,
there's like all these little sneaky ways that publications can like keep you more engaged. So when you don't have that, you're not making as much. But that's a whole other side conversation that I could
oh,
just go on and on about.
wow.
Um, but yeah, there's sometimes there are people who would like send a DM or like whatever, but it didn't really happen often. I think, but that's also the benefit of when you're writing the articles. It's a little bit, I guess, easier to be forgotten because people don't like commit the byline up top to memory. They would more so do that if you were like on air every single day with
Have
like
a
your
face to
handle.
it.
Yeah. Your hand, you know how they do, like they have their name and the handle at the bottom. I think that's where like more people will try to attack you personally. But I think just at the end of the day, whether you want to be behind the scenes or in front, you just have to have thick skin, basically. Which is funny because I'm such a crybaby and sensitive. But you just have to. You're like, whatever, you can insult. Sometimes it could be because you made a small mistake and you correct it, you be transparent with like a correction note, of course, but that's a whole other thing that some people don't like to do either. They like to just silently edit. I always want to be ethical and transparent. But other times it just lots of people will like to tell you you're wrong when you're actually right too, because they're not just fact checking. So I think one time I wrote a story about, I think it had to do with R. Kelly after he went to like jail or something like
Hmm.
that. And it had to do with one of his album releases because he did one of those things, like he released either a song or something like that. And I didn't like take a side. I just like, hey, here's what happened. And I think there's some of his fans that are just like, you're wrong. And I'm like, no, I like looked and fact checked that the song was released this year at this time. Like it's none of my business why he
Hmm.
did it, but I'm just like providing the context for people who want to know this bit of entertainment news. So sometimes, even though people say you're wrong, if you
You have to
hear
have that division between like the emotion and the facts. Like these are the
exactly,
facts. This is what
exactly,
happened.
and people don't deserve responses like I think they want to. I don't know if they try to like stir something up, but for the most part, you can just ignore them. Keep your editors in the loop so they know, like, hey, if this blows up, like you did everything to protect the organization. But
Mm.
you're all good.
And now, what would you say to someone that's interested in pursuing a career in journalism if you could give them some inspiration or tips?
I will say, especially right now, I think you have to be like, I don't want to say a jack of all trades or a Jane of all trades, but kind of, but you have to bring something to the table. So it's like, and that's kind of like something that I feel like with the journalism schools is kind of lacking, even though it's so important to be a good writer. But there's so many good writers out there. And as we can see in the industry, there are tons of people who are out of work. The layoffs keep on happening. And it's
Mhm.
like being a good writer. isn't enough anymore. So I would say either find like I don't want to say just a beat, but find something that you're interested, passionate about that you could kind of become a subject matter expert in, and that will help you along your career. Now, it might like for some people they might not like that because they want to be able to do any and all types of news, which is fine. But I find that finding a like for me, business publications and I will say business publications tend to pay more than some other segments of news.
Hmm.
And I will also say a lot of publications that are geared towards men, because that's also something that pulls me away from lifestyle entertainment and the girlier stuff that feeds my soul. Like, doesn't matter. They'll have their journalists write all these stories about, hey, let's stop the pay gap, this and that, while they're paying the women on their staff awful.
Wow.
So that's something too that, I can't even fully embrace the magazine world like I wanted to just because of that issue. But that's what freelancing's for. And that's also kind of why they do it because it's easier and cheaper to pay you a couple $100s per article than having you on staff and paying you like a competitive wage. But again, these are all side conversations, but you see, as I'm like bringing these up, because I bring stuff to the table, I'm not just a good writer. I know a lot about like the business operations side. So, even when I got the job at Fox, they didn't hire me because, oh, I'm just like this great news reporter. Like I came from a weddings magazine for women of color, which people would never imagine, right? They have all their preconceived notions about Fox, right? About where they lean and stuff. Well, I was able to go in and have conversations with them during like those super days for all those back-to-back interviews and talk to them about like, hey, I saw your media kit and it says your demographic of your audience is like, yeah, male, this like ethnic group, whatever, this age range. And I was able to talk to them from like an educated standpoint, like, hey, not only did I do my research, but like I know this about your audience. I can create content for that specific audience. So I'm not just floundering putting out stories hoping that it's going to be good. Because that's also something some journalists say. They're like, if I could just put out a story and it helps a single person, then I've done my job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, but you might have, and it fed your soul. But at the same time, to last in this industry and keep it going, like the clicks matter. So even if your story only touched one person and it didn't perform well, when they make that eventual list for the layoffs when money is tight, that's probably what's going to happen.
So you got to have that balance of like knowing when to pitch yourself and like all these things, but also know what is going to draw people and know how to, you know
Yeah.
what the audience, what the people want.
Exactly. At least if you're going to be paid by another organization, you got to play the game. It's a business at the end of the day, and they need to keep making money. Now, to stuff that you could do on the side in your spare time, that's when you get to call the shots and do that work that like feeds your soul and that you're passionate about. And you're like, hey, people might not be that interested, but I still want to put it out there in the world. That's the perfect place to do that. If you can like start a blog or channel or something like that. Now, of course, if you're working full time, you got to read what's in like the employee handbook about how far you can go. But that's just a way that you can do both. At least if you're first starting. I think that's even how I ended up getting those earlier jobs is like, hey, like I don't know, they had like the BuzzFeed community, which is kind of like a bloggy kind of thing. I think
Hmm.
like Substack was a thing. And I like built my portfolio like that along with like a personal blog that led to like internships that eventually like the more clips you get the more you can build along the way. So in the beginning there's a lot of free work or very underpaid work, but as long as you keep do that, stay curious, keep learning, but also, like I said, embrace the business side. Because again, there's like this fight between journalists and ad sales, and people feel like, hey, they should never come together and like, separation of church and state. But I feel like people who don't bother to learn about what the ad side does and our mission, which is again, every organization, it's to get clicks, to get people to make money off of the ads that, it's a give and take. We create the stories that the ads go on, but the ads also need to be seen to make the money.
Right, right. Wow. And what's next for you? What's coming up? Do you have articles you're working on with your publication? You have your own endeavors?
Right now, just yeah, I'm juggling a lot right now. I Yeah, I can't say I'm doing any individual projects right now that people could look forward to, but if they're interested and want to learn some local business news, or if they're based in South Florida, you can find my work there, or keep up with my website, like you said, CourtneyDanielle.com. I also have Instagram, which is my whole full name, Cortney Danielle Moore, without a U, by the way, because that happens a lot. Um,
Perfect.
but yeah, I keep myself updated there. I wish I could say I'm branching out, but I'm just so busy with my day job that it's kind of hard to. But look forward to something else in the future, I'm sure.
Of course, it's all coming. Well, thank you so much, Courtney, for joining me on this episode of Crafted and Creative. Give us a like on YouTube, subscribe on iTunes, and I will see you all in the next episode.